Hi, everyone. Welcome again to episode 2, season 1 of the Equity Blueprint podcast. Really excited to have you here. If it's your first time, welcome. If you're returning back, hope you enjoyed the first episode with a good friend of mine, Principal Amen Ra. Wonderful episode all about the power of financial awareness, knowledge, especially as it relates to children and their education. So excited for this episode. And for those that don't know me, my name is Dana Wilson. I'm the CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. And our goal is to make it easier for you to find qualified and credible financial professionals so that you can build out and scale your human capital financial team. And I'm excited for our guest for episode 2, Tyra Edmonds, and going to welcome her to the stage here. How are you?
I am warm.
I know. So backstage we were talking, and Tyra has, for the second time, bragged that where she is warm, and we, on the tri-state side are still in, I don't know, winter. So I am extremely jealous, needless to say. So for those of you in these warmer climates right now, I'm like just so envious because this is not okay. Check on your friends in the tri-state.
Solidarity.
Like, man, see, that's all we get. It's amazing that I'm even inside with a t-shirt on. I almost put on a sweater. I was like, let's pretend that it's warm here. But no, Tyra, so excited to have you again, and just kind of kick off this conversation. So, a lot of this podcast, of course, is just about, making the conversation around money normal and normalizing it and really having fun with it. Because I feel like it's still that taboo topic that we don't just have candid conversations around, especially in a lot of different communities, especially in communities mostly of color, where this is not like the topic of discussion. But now I feel like we can almost argue that it is a big topic of discussion, and not just for our communities, but for the entire world, just in the environment and uncertainty that people are facing with their jobs. But what was your earliest memory of money, and how do you feel like that early memory kind of shaped you? And also, of course, tell everyone who you are and how amazing you are.
Well, that's the hard part. Yeah, as a Black woman, that the tooting your horn, I've been pushing on that. My name is Tyra Edmond, she, her, hers. I am from New Orleans, West Coast, educated, came back home as an adult. I am a CFO of an equity justice nonprofit. I am also a scholar practitioner. I'm finishing up my doctorate in business. And just all around a blurred, quite honestly. I think that moniker can just overlay everything. But
Absolutely. I feel like we should have been dropping some applause bombs every time we mention all those accolades. And I feel like we definitely have to start I need to get an applause button, or I need to work
love
that
it.
into my stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I mean, when you just, in all honesty, I identify as a queer Black woman, blurred, middle age, no kids, community engager, collaborator, accomplice, always got bail money. Pretty much, that's me.
You are the one to see. Actually, let me get my pen and make a post-it note of that, just so I remember where to go. These are all a part of the healthy money conversations. Is also knowing
Absolutely.
who to reach out to, friend, family, or foe, whoever that is going to set aside that money to help you out in that particular way whenever you need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, definitely share with us, what that first memory was of money and how you feel like that kind of shaped you. I feel like we all had our touches
Oh,
with it, and how we kind of viewed it in certain periods of our life, and even just the evolution of that. So yeah, excited to hear more about that.
absolutely. I mean, I always say, I heard this once and I hang on to it, that money is trauma. And and that's for everyone, regardless of who you are and where you came from in experience, right? The idea that someone, something, sometime can be boiled down to a dollar or whatever your currency, insert your currency, right? That's traumatic. The idea of having to find a value if you're on one side as being, in this exchange, and then also maybe even seeing yourself, your family being reduced to an amount, right? So we all come with a cloud of trauma, and then it becomes more impacted depending on your experience, who you are, where you're from, how you identify, and all of these things. And for myself, very traumatic, coming from a house with mental illness, and having, layered trauma, a Black household, mental illness. I came, my daddy always said that I came up to the ninth ward. I was born in the lower nine, came up to the ninth, right? Moved out west very young, being in a single mother home until she was married a few years later, and then just going through different things that come with, living with a disability and trying to make it and trying to grow as an individual and having children. Um, a lot of trauma comes from that. So those are my earliest memories. And no surprise that I went into being, a financial expert, right? Because of that traumatic response, not wanting to be without, not wanting to be viewed as less, but also wanting to make sure that the lights were on. I had food. I was able to share with others and to make sure others don't have to deal with that, with stigma, and sometimes double stigma or triple. I mean, it's exponential at this point. Um, and I always tell folks I got into this work and who I am and what I do for spite. So I feel like my existence is to spite those that say it should not be.
Listen, I feel like that's why a lot of us are just here and disrupting and doing all the things that we're doing in this particular moment, especially, which is so relevant. So on one of the episodes that has not yet aired, it will. But what is so we talked a lot about redefining. I think there's power in how you redefine words and what that means. So as you grew up and got older and you're looking at that reflection of what you just spoke about, which is that financial trauma, which is a whole nother set of things that we really don't even discuss. And that kind of flies through socioeconomic status or skin
Mhm,
color, gender, all the things, right? That word
mhm.
and what that means, especially related to money, no matter how much you have, right? Big said, more money, more problems. That's a, like, that's a real thing. There's
Yeah.
still trauma, real trauma in that and what that comes, right? So how did you start to really redefine that word so that you could get to the place so that you can continue to disrupt in a way for others financially?
I had to think back to my upbringing. Like, I grew up, with the Bible and going regularly, on Sundays. And I remember one thing I heard as a child that I carry today, and that's money is a protection. A lot of times people say, "Oh, money's the root of evil," but that puts intent. But really, money is a protection, and we see that in our capitalistic society. We see that, living in the Western Hemisphere, that, living north of the equator, that protection is what moves people. People want to protect their interest. We see that with the election, why people would even vote against their own self-interest because they were worried about that paper, right? They didn't want to live in a country that has war on the poor instead of war on poverty. Um, and just this selfishness of I got mine, you get yours. Here's some boots, bootstraps, but you got no boots. I feel that the root of all that is to protect ourselves from the reality of capitalism. And honestly, that my little brain as a child, like starting my first cookie business, like hustling, selling cookies, like braiding hair,
Yeah.
doing
Listen,
weed.
people, I feel like kids nowadays, I don't know about this hustle that was going on. Whether it was cookies, for me, it was making so I don't know if do you remember like I can't remember what they're called. I think they actually still have them, but you used to put like beads on this thing and it would make all these different designs.
And it would melt.
Yes, thank you. Because I feel like
Yes.
stuff like that has disappeared and people look at you like you're crazy. I'm like, yeah, those
Yes.
are things that we used to do and sell. And I remember taking my time and iron and creating those and my sweat
Yes.
and tears and all of the bracelets. So yeah, I mean, no one appreciates that back end hustle that we had to work through.
I know. And know what? And, I'm proud of them that they don't,
Yeah.
because my generation, I'm Gen X, and the one after, like, hustled so that the kids today don't. And we see how expansive and how abundance their thinking is and how beautiful that is, that I wish I didn't have to, like, have heads, like waiting in my mama's like living room, so I had money to buy, my PE equipment or things like that. I think it's beautiful, but yeah, like, I mean, that's where I came from. I don't want nobody to do that. I don't want nobody's baby, like, braiding hair all night. They need to go to sleep, wake up, stretch, drink some orange juice, and like thrive. And but yeah, I mean, that's where I came from. I don't think it's any better. Um, but it just was.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I feel like there's a lot of things that we still keep and stuff that we're still kind of trying to move away from. But I think the access and the opportunity now is obviously a lot greater being born into technology and not
Mhm.
really feeling or seeing money. I was on I had a conversation with someone recently, and we are talking about even my earlier memory with money. And I was really talking about the memory of just holding money, physical cash,
Yeah,
which I feel
yeah.
like we've kind of, gotten away from. And that was also a nice stepping stone of feeling the cash,
Mhm.
leaving your pocket, literally. And, you're not really swiping, but you get to kind of see it come in and
Mhm.
disappear. And there was something about the physical touch of it. But I would love to hear your thoughts on how, even that kind of almost now old school physical touch of money and now where we are with everything so digitized. And, obviously with a lot of the work you do at the nonprofit, do you see there's differences or nuances or even hurdles because we don't have that same, touch feeling with money anymore? Or do you think it even mattered?
I think anything tactile, it elicits like memory, right? Like you said, like when you say money, I can smell it, right? Or you could touch or remember like forgetting to take it out of our pants and like it was still there and learning the hard way. Oh, it's fabric, we're good. It's not paper, those sorts of things. I think it slowed us down in our spending and being more intentional with where we put our money, how we voted with our dollars. It also helped, our communities that did not have, the credit card machine that like went like this. You had to put the paper and like run it back and forth.
I'm gonna have to
Um,
drop like some visuals on this because I literally had a flashback of how they would do that even in the
You could
mall.
hear it too.
Oh my
That
god.
big roller going across, and then the card would jump, and it was a mess. Like, and then you could change your mind because you're like, never
Yes.
mind. Like,
It's
it
just
didn't.
like, yeah.
They just give you the paper back, and you tear it up, and it didn't happen.
God, now I'm be thinking
Um,
about that for the rest of the day. I literally had forgotten all about that particular process until just now. Sorry for all the listeners who now are in some state of shock because they remember that noise.
the noise, yes, that was just like another like, do I really need this? Should I really go for it? Because you had a way to unwind,
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I think it changed us into how we viewed money as a society. It wasn't something just on a screen. It was more of a reality. It was more of an asset that had to be traded or are bartered for our time or for opportunities, right? Like I can look fly today, or I can support my community, or I can save. I remember having like big giant piggy banks, and all in through my childhood up into adulthood, that was like my rainy day fund, or the coffee can, things like that. And now we have to be more intentional today. We have to set up safeguards if we are saving towards things, or if we want to, the mom and pop store, we have to go to the ATM and get the money out to give to them. Um, which is, change how we spend it even in our communities, right? I leave the country a lot, and a lot of countries don't have Venmo, Cash App, yada yada yada. So if you don't have the currency, you don't get the thing. um and then thinking about too, like tipping, you use your card a lot of times, that you can't give a tip. So I now ask, folks in the industry, what's your Venmo, what's your Cash App, and I will directly tip them. But that makes it more intentional. I just think that basically is to change the speed and the way that we direct our funds. If they're going to not be, extractive, we
Yeah.
have to slow down and be more intentional where we're directing the funds.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really great point about intention, especially within, smaller communities where that dollar does sometimes circulate a little bit. I mean, we know in a lot of
Mhm.
communities the dollar doesn't circulate, or it's circulating, way too fast. But when we did have that physical touch, it was just a slower, more conscious intention of where you were actually, putting it, to your point, and being able to kind of potentially get back to that in some some way, shape, or form. I know we're
Mhm.
just so used to everything handheld, and for those who do travel and want to travel, it is a good point, because I think just as that luxury that we can say, in quotations, of being American, and assuming that everyone is styled the same way
Yeah.
when you go out of certain
Yeah.
countries, especially if you're not used to traveling, and you just think, oh, I can just take my X card, or maybe my one credit card and a debit card, and it's like, well, that won't work everywhere, and you really have to be mindful of
Mhm.
the physical cash that you have, and even just the respect, um,
Yeah.
from even a country perspective, of having their cash and valuing that, for those communities that are still very intentional and cash based, because that they are taking immediately back to their families.
Mhm.
And I love your brain, because it's so expansive around all of the work that you've done in research and education. Like, how, if we were to really start to get back to that point, because I feel like it's in this moment, like this is a good time to talk about how we do that, right? We're talking about all the transferring of wealth in various communities, and what that big wealth transfer can look like. But of course, that big wealth transfer will probably be very digitized. But it's like, what are those ways that we can pour more into our communities with the hand to hand pass off of that dollar? Like, what do you think that we could do about that, or just being more intentional around how we do that?
Yeah, I think we have the tool, we have the internet,
Hmm.
and so we can find out about things so much quicker, just a simple search. And then with, generative AI, you can even tell it what your intent is, like sometimes I'll roll into a city or a whole nother country, and I'll just ask it, you know, Black women own businesses in the city that I'm going to. I took a trip to the Turks and the Caicos, and also to the Grand Caymans. Those are our folks of our diaspora, right? And so I asked it, and it told me where to go, and I went there. It's like so much easier now. Living in New Orleans, you know, Black New Orleanian, insert the industry. Boom, there it is. Um, so I feel like the research barrier is down. The speed is up. So now it's just about us either showing up, physically or virtually, um, and then making sure that we help with getting the message out, using our platforms, hashtags, putting folks on to different platforms, writing reviews, like, understanding that a Google review is the best review you can give because it's going to be scattered to all the different platforms. And that could be from a restaurant to a service, right? I have a Black woman that's working on my estate planning. I'm going to give her a Google review, right? That's going to bring more traffic back to her. Um, and then even using, generative AI to ask, like, for yourself to even build your own self wealth. Like, here's my situation. How do I get to this goal? When I bought my first house alone, it was in Portland, Oregon, which is a happening but very white metropolitan city. I think the stats is that it's the number one white metropolitan city in the whole nation. Like,
Wow. Yeah.
you know, um, I looked for, 0% grants for buying my home. I found it. I saw it on TV. I was on the internet and I Googled it and did that like rabbit hole search that we do, scroll of doom, on our phone,
Oh,
and
nice.
found $20,000 0%, and it was excused, or 20 yeah, $20,000 5 years, 20% every year. And that's what I used to get my home that I bought alone. Same thing with my second home in a different location. Generative AI. It will ask. When you really think about that, I'm not giving any plug to one that we all know that we use, but
Mhm.
it has consumed the entire internet, that it's
Mhm.
just sitting and waiting. Back in the day, like the computer that used, the little cursor used to just bounce, like waiting for
Oh
your
my
prompt.
gosh.
It's just sitting there waiting for more information.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage.
Yeah. That was literally the most annoying thing of trying to do that. But yeah, I think you make a good point too, because it's like we're figuring out ways to really use the technology that we have in hand and not, asking it things proactively, from a work and professional perspective, and then, random stuff personally, but really how we start to use it to maybe even start to classify who we are, even at financial landscape, or plan for
Mhm.
ourselves. And not that, like everything else, be careful of like what it reports back to you, make sure you're reading it and it makes
Correct.
sense. But even just if you're, crafting out your details of what you want your personal plan to look like, and you continuously, feed it and ask it those questions to kind of drill down and give you more ideas. I mean, that's probably the most helpful place for you to start, at least
Right.
to have something as you start to scale and look at what your, your life or your wealth life looks like now. So as you've, moved through your career, and you've, had, your transitions, and, went from either different spaces and places, and also learning degrees and continuing to move up in the academic space, what have you found that has been like your, like financial transition spaces as you're moving through those, parts of your life, whether it's kind of going for this, next place in academia, or, from a job perspective? What are the filters that you do or track within your mind?
Well, I think this like transition helped happen to me where I became a social scientist. And so I've really shifted to a lot of observation before acting. Um, and gathering my research, whether if it's like, writing about Black employee retentions in nonprofits and observing the literature, or observing, what's going on in our economy at this moment. We know, like, today Trump just dropped some blanket tariffs, but we knew it was coming, right? By the things that we were reading and hearing, on the news, or anytime the times is, and they're breaking news, which seems like it's every day, every hour, that nothing's really breaking anymore. Observing and then making, an educated guess with the data, that's what I've learned to do. And that's what I've shifted. The thing that I've stopped doing is going, that's interesting, and then just moving on. Actually taking it and filing it someplace until I get, more pieces of data in order to come up with something analytical, and just make sure that I'm investing in myself and I'm betting on myself at this point. No more is this like imposter syndrome. I have 25 years in accounting and finance, 4 degrees, got accepted to a program to work on my 5th. Like, I can consider myself a subject matter expert at
Yes,
this point, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's like, let's use that. Like, I didn't just pour into myself and giggles, right? Like, let's see what I can extract from that. So I'm trusting my connections that I'm making in my mind. I'm also making sure I'm around folks, whether they're aunties or nieces and nephews, right? Because there's generations above me and below me, to help to gather data and information, find out what they're thinking, what are they talking about, and make sure you're around, a community that you've chosen. It doesn't have to just be family that is about being like, about us, about you personally, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's in harmony with, our world, and a love of people, and a love of thriving, not just surviving. Put that in your data set. Don't just go extractive and look at, trends and, what is the analysis, the history, and, that's what generative AI can do, right? It can't synthesize what Big Mama said and then see what, your little baby is talking about, right? Like, if you're hearing it here and you're hearing it there, then there's your theme: observe and act.
Oh yeah, and a lot of that is, it's so relevant, and things that we can pour into it to produce in just a different format, so that it's easily digestible, right? It's not that we're feeding it such random information, or trying to take stuff that we're hearing from trends or things that we should be doing. It's more like, how do I make it relevant to me, things I think about, stuff I want to do, stuff I've heard, and let it spit back to you. Well, okay, now it makes a lot more sense for me to figure out the words and stuff that I'm using, and try to make sense of all the things that
it takes a lot of data points to come up to a conclusion. Coming back home, I'm a New Orleanian, but I haven't lived here for a long time, right? So how do I get involved in my community? I had to get involved in my community. So I do sit on a couple of boards. One of them is my Main Street board in the neighborhood I live in, right? So I'm hearing what's going on my streets, from being on both sides, being an advocate for my community and being a part of my community. Local, right? If it's local business, local government, local associations, they have the most impact in your life. So why not become involved and help shape your future, shape the future for those that are coming behind you? If I could say anything, like, that has been a viewpoint that I've taken from when I worked in local government, is just shifting my perspective and saying, hey, this is what's going to impact my day, is here. It's not what some folks are doing thousands of miles away, right? They do, but it has to reach me. And how the folks that live around me that are empowered, whether if they're like community elders to business owners to elected officials, they have to synthesize that in order for it to come into effect me. So I need to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that we also need to remember too, right? There's always going to be things that we agree with, don't agree with at the highest level of government. And although this is not the normal space that we're used to being in,
Mhm.
if we do focus on our community, local, the things that we can control, the people that we can pour into so that they can, make better decisions and pour that information on. It's like just
Mhm.
that pouring of that, location in those local communities, and getting back to that, showing up at your town meetings.
Mhm.
My mother is religious for going to her. I don't know. I mean, I think she just sits in there. Hopefully, she was. I'm hoping she don't look at this podcast and calling her out. I'm gonna get a phone call and a text her.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
But she's there. She shows up and
Mhm.
she knows what's going on, and I get a full report about all the things and all the people, even the local drama. But
Yeah.
to the serious point about that is that we do have to show up, and we want these changes. And I like what you said before about us consuming a lot of this information, especially as it relates to our finances and potential wealth that we're continuing to generate, and not sitting on the sidelines, and
Mhm.
not doing what we did before. Where, to your point, yeah, it's like, okay, I see this article, I'll save it for later. And now is the time to just make sure you are, understanding what may or may not be affecting you and how immediate it might be affecting you.
Absolutely. And join up. I mean,
Mhm.
like folks have done like saving circles together. Like single people that are not getting married, have no kids, they're buying places together. They're going in business together. Like, fractional ownership is still ownership.
Mhm.
And so whatever it takes for us to get in, get in. We're seeing other community of colors that do that. Folks all bundle together, get the first house, and then roll off, and they all move to the next one. We have to do that too, right? Things are just getting more expensive. The regulations are and the barriers are going up intentionally to keep us out. So my grandmama always said, sometimes you got to get your butt off your shoulders and let it hang low like everyone else's, right? So do what you got to do to get in, because once you get in and you own, that is the leverage you have to continue owning.
Listen, that was a whole word. There's nothing to compete with that. That's it. Shut down the entire podcast. But no, before we go, so what at this point would you say brings you the most financial joy, and where do you think that comes from?
Oh, I think it's pouring in to others, knowledge is not owned, it's borrowed and lent. So being able to reach people where they are and not expecting them to understand like me, but meeting where they are and helping them to continue the process to reach one, teach one. I mean, if we want to go old school, let's pull it back.
Go ahead, go ahead. I'm gonna make that a part of the title. Like, listen to this if you want all of the tips between the new and the old school. So yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so important and refreshing to really have those look backs and appreciation. So
Mhm.
if you had just like one final thought or message to people who are obviously just going through a lot, especially I know you work for a nonprofit now. What would be your message to them, just to kind of hang in there, and how they can kind of keep moving in this environment?
Don't be siloed. Find your community. Collective action is where we're seeing a move now, especially in nonprofits. Finding collections of donors, funders, other nonprofits you can go in together with for grants, funding, um, and also just having community, I always say, forget allies. We're about accomplices, especially when it's like real right now. Real, you need your community that has your back, that's going to speak your name in rooms. And that could be, if you're an organization, if you're a person looking for work, if you just need support, because right now we have to support each other like never before in our own lifetimes for many of us. Um, this kind of makes me think about civil rights days when I talk to my parents, and they knew everybody on their street, and everybody on the street was a part of their microeconomy, right? Somebody watched your kids, somebody did your hair, somebody made plates. We have to go back to that, because that's what got us, as especially as Black people, to this point where we were thriving, probably for the first time in our history in this country. So we have to go back to the basics, and that's each other, that's community.
Absolutely. And there's nothing more important to that place where we did know each other and we're able to support each other in real time and look out for each other. It's definitely missed in, the world in general, but especially in a lot of our community. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I couldn't thank you enough for blessing the podcast on this rebrand. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it, Tyra, and dropping some gems.
Thank you. You know I love you.
Yeah. Thank you. Like, heartful. But yeah, I'm sure I'm going to have you back. I think you will have to do some sort of round table, because I feel like there's a lot to just dive deeper on a lot of different levels, especially with a lot of stuff that you work on for research and things like that people definitely enjoy. But again, thanks for coming on. And for all those listening, thanks for coming back and listen to another episode of the Equity Blueprint podcast. In this rebrand that we're on, and journey that we continue on to normalize the conversation around money, make it fun, interesting, and of course, making sure that you're walking away with something that relates to you. So come back for more episodes, and we'll see you all soon.